Welcome to Mountains Made Low, where we help you encounter the love of God and live well in the modern world. I'm Christine Reagan.
And I'm Dennis Mueller.
And Dennis, it's a hot one out there. It's in Philly. It's been very warm, don't you think?
Yeah, it's been hot.
Yeah. Wow. There's nothing quite like your co-host back and forth. You can be like, yeah, Christine, it's really, we've had some blistering days. And then I was going to say, well, we have a hot topic today.
Oh, it has. It's been grueling.
No, it's over. Stop. No, today we're going to have a conversation about a word that I think people are even afraid to say in our culture. You can tell me if you agree. Modesty. The hot topic of modesty.
Yeah.
If you talk about modesty today, I think that people dismiss you as immediately being old-fashioned, judgmental. You have some kind of puritanical approach to society. And sometimes when people talk about something like being modest or immodest, they're often associating the word with just clothing. And frankly, that's usually directed towards women and women's clothing. For some, the term conjures up images of a strict dress code and skirt measuring, long lists of rules, or discussions about what is or isn't appropriate that maybe left some people feeling a lot of shame. You might look at society today and in 2026 and say, maybe we should bring back the measuring sticks. I don't know. A little shame might go a long way. I'm kidding. That doesn't change hearts. That's why it's not a healthy approach. And I think that's why some people have some scars about maybe how people have been aggressive with them or spoken at them or tried to enforce a particular standard of something.
Yeah, and I would say maybe even react maybe viscerally when the topic kind of comes up because of some of the baggage that they might have experienced in the past.
The thing is that our Catholic faith promotes modesty, and it teaches us that it's far deeper and richer than just what you wear on the outside, and it's directed towards men and women.
And so today we want to dive into this topic of modesty a little bit because there really is a beauty to it that I don't think many people recognize. And we believe it doesn't stand alone, but is connected to many of the other virtues. They're all interwoven. And when we live a life of virtuous living, that's what makes us holy. It's not merely about covering up the body. It's about revealing the soul's relationship to God. And I think that we would really suggest that one's relationship to God should manifest in how you dress, but more importantly, it should reveal why you chose to present yourself, your whole self, in such a way, right? Like what's going on beneath all these things? Because everything today is a statement, in a sense.
Well, fashion's its own form of communication, would you say? Like you communicate yourself with how you. I mean, look at you today. You are certainly communicating something today. I'm communicating something with the nose ring. I know I'm doing that. Frankly, I want to do that.
Right.
That's a whole other episode. But yeah, I mean, the way we dress does say something about us. It doesn't reveal our whole selves, but it does. It reveals style, personality, things like that.
And I think when we get into the topic of modesty, I think sometimes we need to be honest with our motivations. What's really pushing us behind the choices that we're making with regards to how we present ourselves. And that's just not limited to dress, as you said. It's everything. Like, how do I present myself? First, I mean, you have to acknowledge up front that, our culture really is highly sexualized. I mean, it's a given. People today are encouraged in virtually everything we consume to present ourselves in a way that attract attention, that generate desire and gain approval from others. And so we're constantly told that our value is tied to our appearance, it's our attractiveness, our ability to be noticed. But frankly, this is a real poor understanding of sexuality, which is really a beautiful gift. But we don't recognize our sexuality as a gift. But from a Catholic perspective, like, sexuality is a beautiful gift. It's not something that we have to be ashamed of. Our masculinity, our femininity are gifts from God, and the attraction that exists between men and women is part of God's beautiful design and ultimately points to other divine things like love, marriage, family, even the communion between Christ and his church.
I see a lot of sexual exploitation today, and I think that people are encouraged to weaponize their sexuality. And then there's another element of it where they delight in doing so. They like the fact that they can make themselves seem like an object of desire.
What do you think, like a shock value?
It's one thing for somebody to force another to behave in a particular way, but to engage in it willingly, to relish in it, to consider it a an empowering act. Like I think about people who are engaged in pornography, things like that. They promote it, they delight in it. I think they're deeply oppressed by it and they don't understand it. But I think that when people are using their sexuality in a way that God does not desire, that God didn't make them for, they're enjoying it in the process. And that can be we wouldn't have admitted that maybe decades ago or centuries ago or generations ago. Oh, I get to do this. I get to behave this way and it's empowering for me. The problem with that is that love is never a weapon. And when we detach sexuality from love, it becomes something to be consumed rather than something, or rather someone to be cherished. And people become objects rather than persons. And human beings become valued for what they can provoke or what they can elicit from somebody rather than for who they are. And this is why I think modesty is really worth reclaiming and revisiting, because it honors the human person in a way that I think really people have forgotten about today. Having said that, as the body stands in its natural state, I think we should say that there's nothing immodest about it. The thing is that our bodies exist in a fallen world. And I think about the Catechism, paragraph 400, which tells us that in light of sin, like these are the ramifications of the fall, that your relationships, male and female, will be marked by lust and domination. And so because of that, we don't cover our bodies in and of themselves because there's anything wrong with them. Our bodies, though, because of sin, exist in a fallen world, and therefore our bodies are not respected and understood and utilized in a way that they would have been before the fall. And so that's why we cover it up. I mean, have you ever thought about why people wear clothes?
No.
But really think
No,
about
I
it.
understand
Because,
it.
Adam and Eve in the garden did not wear clothes.
Yeah.
In light of sin, they cover themselves up. Why? Now, it could be figurative of a lot of different things, but they now exist in a world that did not exist prior to sin. And so the whole purpose of us adorning our body, you could say in such a way, I think is because, and there's plenty of theologians to back this up, is because our bodies are still good, but the world is not as good as it was. And so our bodies are not understood. And so we cover them up accordingly in ways that would be considered modest.
Well, I like that our bodies are not understood. The dignity of the human person kind of becomes an issue.
Yeah, we can't recognize it in the same way.
Yeah, we can't recognize it, yeah.
And so, I mean, John Paul II says this, plenty of moral theologians have said this, that we cover our bodies not, and we're going to talk about way more than the body today, but I think we need to at least address the fact that people associate modesty and the body and clothing immediately. We cover our bodies not because they're bad, but because they're good. And I don't think people even start a conversation on modesty with the goodness of the body or even the goodness of the person. So in a fallen world, modesty recognizes that our bodies reveal something sacred about who we are, and then it acknowledges the beauty of the human person while protecting that beauty from being reduced to an object or being the object of some kind of lustful degradation that it's very easy to fall into now because of what sin does to the world. And so its modesty is like a defense mechanism, maybe. And that's, it's good to do that. It's good to defend ourselves and our bodies from things that would harm us,
Yeah.
right? And might frankly harm another person as they're utilizing us for their own purposes. And so it's a defense mechanism to a certain extent.
Yeah, and I agree. I would even say that modesty helps us to really see ourselves and others as persons created in the image and likeness of God. And that's not easy in light of sin. And you mentioned that, it's just this fallen nature. I mean, this is one of the reasons why clothing has become a necessity. But ultimately, modesty is not about hiding human dignity. It's really about revealing it properly, in a proper fashion. And we certainly can and we certainly do abuse it. It's like an abuse of power in some way. And so while modesty certainly affects how we dress, it reaches much deeper than clothing, right? I mean, we start out with that because I think that's where our mind goes. But There's so much more that we want to help our listeners to really understand with regards to modesty, because it's far more than our mere appearance. It shapes how we speak, how we act, how we present ourselves, how we seek attention, and how we understand our relationship with God and others. So let's we want to spend a little bit of time exploring what modesty really is, this broader understanding of modesty, to kind of expand our horizons, our understanding of this incredible virtue, and why it matters for both men and women, how it connected to humility, and then why it remains an essential virtue for anyone seeking holiness in the modern world.
Here's what the Catechism says. The Catechism teaches us that modesty, this is a quote from paragraph 2521, modesty protects the intimate center of the person, which is what? The heart, right? It means refusing to unveil what should remain hidden. Now, I think it's interesting that the Catechism really doesn't begin with clothing. It begins with the person, right? It's talking about the absolute center of the human person. So modesty protects something sacred. We are the ones that are sacred. We are sacred to God. We should be sacred to each other. Every human being is made in the image and likeness of God, and every person possesses an inherent dignity that deserves to be respected. Modesty is a virtue that safeguards that dignity.
It also influences how we speak and how we present ourselves, and maybe even how we use some social media, how we seek attention, how we can relate to others in general. It was Thomas Aquinas who described modesty as a virtue that moderates our outward behavior according to reason and charity. Yeah,
like the head and the heart. It's not just about what you show to the world externally. It's something that's going on inside of you. Yeah. So modesty affects how we dress, certainly. Okay. The Catechism, paragraph 2522, says modesty is decency. It inspires one's choice of clothing, right? Even the Catechism doesn't ignore that. It keeps silence or reserve where there is evident risk of unhealthy curiosity. One of the greatest misunderstandings about modesty is that it's primarily directed towards women, too. And the Catholic Church has never taught this. Modesty is a virtue for every human person.
It's another sign of our fallen world.
Yeah, it's like it's the woman's fault, right? She gave the apple to Adam. Come on, give me a break. It's not untrue, but let's not just reduce it to that.
Right. Let's remember it's Adam's sin.
Right. And it's funny, as I've taught other religions of the world, I think Judaism does this better. The role of the man being modest. I have really never heard a Catholic conversation on male modesty. Have you ever heard it?
No.
No. I remember having to go to high school talks and presentations, and I'm not saying that they don't address the men, but I was inundated with talking points directed towards women only, and that you have to make sure that you are not eliciting a negative or a lustful response from a man.
And given your experience with that, do you think that those type of conversations are taking place today in high schools?
I think people are afraid to have them at all.
Yeah.
I think there's still groups like the Culture Project, and I think they do a much better job of this than maybe it was done 20, 30 years ago.
Sure.
I wouldn't know. I'm only 10, but it's been much more directed at women. I don't even know that those groups are being brought in the same way. I don't even know if because teachers are afraid that they're going to hear from parents.
Yeah.
And so if you do say, hey, listen, for a boy or a girl, of an underage level, if you were to say that clothing would be immodest, that clothing's immodest. Well, the parents sent them out in that clothing. And so it's not just about talking to the child.
Sometimes.
You now have to most of the time.
Sometimes.
The child lives in your house. What are you saying?
Yeah.
They're changing at the bus station?
Well, sometimes. But sometimes it's sometimes parents are not as aware as we think that they are.
I'm sure. I think 9 times out of 10, they say, you look great. So, and I think that's what deters the conversations on modesty, because it's not that you're just talking to the child. You're not just trying to form the child. You now have the responsibility of forming the adult in the equation. And sometimes you kind of feel like maybe the only adult in the room. So the fact of the matter is that it applies to both men and women. Men can be immodest, women can be immodest, young people can be immodest, older people can be immodest. The issue is not simply how much skin you're showing, although perhaps I think that's the most self-evident example of modesty, which is why it gets so much attention. But, if you're talking about how it applies to how you speak, how you gain attention, how you relate to other people, well, that's something that applies to both men and women in a variety of situations.
Like when you get into modesty, I think one of the biggest questions that we need to start with is how am I presenting myself to others, right? Am I seeking excessive admiration and praise? Am I attempting to elevate myself above others? Am I honoring my dignity and the dignity of those around me? Or am I just seeking the inflation of my own ego, especially at the expense of others? So there's a lot more to it than just dress.
Yes.
It's really how I'm presenting myself overall to others. And sometimes I think dress can be used to accentuate that.
Yeah.
How I'm trying to present myself.
Right. And you see the dress before maybe somebody discloses it, or somebody opens their mouth, or
Yeah. If I have something with an ego and I'm attention seeking, then it could, and I'm not saying this is every instance, but then my dress might be magnifying that in some way.
Sure. You're right. Immodesty, these are good questions to ask ourselves, and it can be seen in a number of different ways. I mean, what about a man who is always boasting about his accomplishments? Well, that's lacking modesty. What about an Instagram influencer that's obsessed with likes and attention? Well, perhaps that lacks modesty. How about a businessman or a woman who flaunts their wealth? That's lacking modesty. How about a priest or a deacon or somebody in the clergy who is seeking applause rather than trying to save souls in and through their preaching?
Sure.
That's a lack of modesty. That's a heart issue. You see that modesty is so much more than what is or isn't on the body. It extends to the mind, it extends to our speech and to our bodies, but ultimately it's about the orientation of the heart. And when the heart's messed up, it can cause all kinds of problems.
So would you say that humility then is an important part or connection with modesty?
There are certain virtues that it's intimately connected to. Hopefully you can speak to this a little bit. If you're humble, it
Humility?
can help. I'm so eager to hear what you have to say.
I'm a work in progress.
I think humility can help you exercise proper modesty. There are vices like pride, which break it down.
Yeah. People who do humility well, who really cultivate that virtue. Immodesty is not an issue with those individuals. And so they are definitely...
Are they in the room with us? No, I'm just kidding. You're like, no. Got it.
I think sometimes for our listeners, like, maybe there's a particular struggle with a virtue, but because these virtues are so connected, if you begin to concentrate on another virtue that maybe you do better at, start there, and the spillover effect will begin to make the other vices a little easier to achieve. When we look at humility, it's not thinking less of ourselves. Humility is thinking of ourselves truthfully. Teresa of Avila says humility is walking in truth. And so I think if we're going to cultivate modesty, starting off with humility, we recognize that I'm a sinner, but I'm also deeply loved by God. And the humble person doesn't exaggerate his own self, right? I mean, that's the antithesis of humility. The key here really is that modesty is humility expressed externally and outwardly. That's where the connection lies. And humility really governs the interior life, while modesty, I guess you could say, would govern the exterior life. And so a humble heart naturally produces modest behavior, and what exists in the heart eventually will make its way out for better or for worse. So interiorly, if I'm experiencing humility, before God and before others, not boasting and doing all of these things.
Well, what does Corinthians say? Love does not do this. Love does not do this. It does not boast.
It's not boastful. It's not all these things. But the opposite of pride, right? So if I'm not being prideful, when I no longer need to be the center of attention, modesty, I think, really becomes possible in those instances. And so when a person, I think, is secure in God's love, he no longer needs the constant affirmation of others, and he no longer needs to maybe seek the attention of others in order to feel self-worth or fulfillment.
Right. However it is that you seek attention, right?
Yeah,
And that's why I think it does reside much more interiorly before it comes out.
Right, because our dignity comes from God, and that's not something that we connect. And if we're not a person of faith, then we're not even going to draw that line. And I think that's where we struggle with society today, because it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like one of the most critical plays is missing from the playbook, and we're like, well, I don't know how to win the game without this. We're missing this critical.
That's a really good analogy for life. It's like you're put here on earth, you're trying to figure things out, you're making it through, but you don't have the playbook.
Yeah.
You don't have if you don't have a relationship with God, you don't know how to play the game. You don't know what you don't know what you're doing here.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, thanks.
I'm steal it.
Yeah.
It's mine now.
But I think the great enemy of modesty is pride. Pride is the opposite of humility. Then I think we can run into the same issue when it comes to modesty. Because when we look at pride, and we've talked about pride on other episodes, but pride is really this disordered elevation of the self. It was Augustine who described pride as the love of one's own excellence. We are the
You think
cat's
you are
meow.
hot
We think we are hot
stuff.
stuff, right? So it was really pride that led Adam and Eve to sin. It's pride that's the root of all sin. And the proud person seeks glory that belongs to God and places it upon themselves. Modesty pumps the brakes on this temptation and reminds us that I'm not the center of the universe. God is. Value doesn't come from the gaze or the praise of others. It comes from just our identity in God. You know, my value comes from being created in God's image and likeness, being a beloved son, being heir to the throne. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
If I don't have that ordered correctly, or if I don't have that in my playbook, it's going to be I'm going to be struggling all the time. I really feel for people today because this lack of or anti-religiosity that they have, like they don't want to maybe connections with the church. They don't want to be told by any type of religious organization what they can, what they can't do, or they just leave the church thinking that it's repressive or that it's inconsequential or that they don't need it.
They really get hung up on the nose, all the nose, and they don't see the yes that God says to us in our creation. They don't see that element of a relationship and the value of a life that is constantly offering that yes back, affirming that yes.
Yeah. And then they suffer, and the world suffers because of it.
Well, we're dropping some hard truth bombs. But you're saying that, so humility is like this antidote to pride.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, St. Bernard, I have a quote here. He said, humility is the virtue by which a man becomes conscious of his own unworthiness. Now, it's not meant for us to be like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst ever. That's not where he's coming from. That's not what our faith is telling us. But an understanding of that allows God to take center stage, right? He increases, I decrease. And then that awareness frees us from this endless pursuit of recognition in some way, which is pride, which is immodesty. The modest person is liberated. The modest person can come forward in our own selves, and we're liberated from this exhausting need to impress and to boast and to be worshipped by others. And all of that falls under immodesty. And we haven't said anything about how you dress when you do those things. No. Now we're going to talk about clothing. But any other thoughts about humility, pride, about the internal struggle that goes on? What is it like to have... I'm just joking. I was going to say, what's it like to have such an ego? No, but like, what do you think? Anything I say comes out in a way that I don't mean.
No, you could say it.
Because you're not that bad. I'm making you seem so much worse than you actually are. Having said that, I don't live with you. So.
Right. No, but let's
call someone who does.
No, but I joke around with humility a lot, and kind of play into that a little bit too. But
we all do, yeah.
I became acutely aware during my seminary formation that was maybe an area of weakness for me.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask how they charitably shared that with you?
The guys in our class, there was 7 of us at the time. We have to do evaluations of each other. Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we just kind of, it's like feedback and everything, and then they sit down with us and say, "Hey, this is what your classmates are seeing." And
does that make it difficult to have relationships with them afterwards?
No.
See, men are so. I guarantee you put a group of women in a room,
they'd be trying to figure out who it was,
and they would seethe with rage.
Yeah, no.
They would.
No, I can imagine maybe some people would take it that way. And I dismissed it. I'm going to be honest with you. I dismissed it. When I'm going through this, I thought that the evaluation was always, I didn't like it because you were forced to
find something wrong.
You were forced to find something wrong, and you were forced into, they kind of corralled you into, you had to pick from this list. And
it's not open-ended.
Yeah, it's not open-ended. I just felt, again, as somebody whose background is in industrial organizational psychology, like it was a poorly formed evaluation. So what I would do is I would look at, well, what is the least threatening thing that I could put down for my buddy here? Because I don't really see him as having any type of problems. I'm not seeing any problems. So what do? I put down, well, humility. That's it.
Okay.
It's an easy fix. So like when I'm hearing that in the feedback, right into my ego, I'm just dismissing it. So I'm like, well, I put that down for those guys too, and I know why I put it down, so I'm sure they'll do the same thing. So I was a little ignorant of that. But as I, again, working with my spiritual director, working through prayer and everything, I began to see like maybe a pattern of behavior where I was thriving on certain things.
Wow. Okay.
And so I realized, ooh, you know what? I mean, if maybe I do have an issue with humility, and then I began to work on it.
Yeah.
I really began to actively work on it. And I know that I've made some incredible progress because my wife has told me so. And she don't pull any punches. So,
I imagine it's a difficult conversation to have when people struggle with modesty in areas that are more internally focused. I would imagine you have to break down a lot of walls to be
Yeah.
able to have them even hear something like that.
Right.
These are not easy conversations to have.
and that's where I kind of saw maybe some of the immodesty rearing its head in the interior type stuff. But again, like even with the earrings, the tattoos, all the things that I had back in the day. I mean, it was doing it for attention seeking. It was. I mean, that was.
Is that always bad necessarily?
No,
Yeah.
no. I'm not saying that it's not always bad, but I wasn't really doing it for the. I wasn't really doing it for the right reasons. Like
Okay.
if I could get your attention, and then keep that attention, through X, Y, and Z. I think that's where people struggle to see the connection of immodesty, because I think sometimes immodesty can be masked by, oh, that's just a humility thing, and it can be. I mean, I think there's a connection there, but I think what's going on interiorly sometimes is what we're taught. We have to really ask ourselves, well, why am I doing this?
Yeah, before anything comes out, it's in.
Why,
It's
yeah,
present.
why am I?
It's like,
Why am I saying this? Why am I reacting this way? Why am I acting this way? People might look at it like as a humility issue, like he's just being prideful.
But people wouldn't necessarily say that they're immodest. They would immediately attach it to pride.
Pride, yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I think that's why you have to kind of see that there's a very close connection
yeah.
between these two virtues, that sometimes one can mask the other. Mm-hmm. We only recognize it when it becomes manifest in its outward appearance, when all of a sudden somebody is dressing in a certain way. And I think that's where our focus tends to go, but it's so important to realize that it runs much deeper than that. If I'm dressing a certain way, it's because interiorly something is going on. And so I need to sit back now, and I need to have an honest conversation with myself about what that is. Okay, so why am I acting this way? Why am I dressing this way? Why am I trying to provoke things this way? Pride could certainly be a part of that. It's leading to other things. There's an interior disposition of the heart that's out of skew. And unless I take time to pray on that, to reflect on that, and to ask God to heal me of that, all of which I had to do for myself.
I like that you bring up the healing, because we're not saying that everything finds itself in pride. It could come from a place of woundedness, brokenness, things like that too.
Yeah.
Either way, the problem may remain the same. If it's coming out, if you don't know who you are in Jesus, no matter where that came from.
And even if you do, I would say if you're struggling with a particular vice, you still need to pray to be healed of that.
Oh yeah, that's an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
You keep learning
Right.
who you are in Jesus, and that as you change, that relationship changes too.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the interior life. You said we live in a hyper-sexualized culture. There is something wrong with the way that perhaps people communicate themselves through dress. Yeah. Okay, so having said all of this, the church still recognizes that clothing does communicate something. And perhaps, again, it's the first impression that somebody has of us before they've engaged us in conversation. I think that could also be unfair, because you could easily draw unfair conclusions. But if we start from the place of dress is some form of communication, I think that is healthy to recognize. Mm-hmm. What we wear does say something about how we understand ourselves and what we're made for. Having said all of this, I think people think, oh, if you dress modestly, you're wearing turtlenecks all the time, or it has to be ugly. It cannot be colorful. It can't attract any attention. And so women should only be walking around in tent dresses, hiding the fact that they have a shape, and men have to wear ill-fitting clothing. It doesn't mean denying our sexuality and our God-given beauty. We don't have to pretend that God didn't give us a shape to begin with, right? Think about just how men and women are made. Our bodies have particular shapes. We don't have to hide the goodness of God's creation necessarily. Catholicism historically has always celebrated beauty. We have beautiful churches. I think about
Beautiful art.
our artwork. I think about how the Blessed Mother has been depicted in artwork. She's beautiful, right? I've never seen an ugly image of Mary. Like, let's purposely give her features that would not. No, when you see pictures of Mary, you're like, gosh, she's beautiful. There's a reason that she's represented that way. So beauty is not the enemy, but vanity is the enemy. As clothing stands,
And vanity is connected to pride.
pride. There you go. You know, as clothing is, if I were to put a bunch of clothes on this table here, it's neither modest or immodest. It's an inanimate object. It doesn't have the ability to be modest or immodest. We only use those terms when we're in the realm of people. When people employ the clothing, when they use the clothing, then you could make a decision as to whether that is being presented modestly or immodestly. Having said that, I absolutely do think that there are objective principles that as Catholics, as Christians, that exist when it comes to clothing and what we wear. Christopher West says this. He's one of the most well-known theologians on the theology of the body and sexual morality. I'm also a big fan of his. He points out that it's what makes a conversation on modesty really tricky is when you have objective principles and they're mixed with subjective application. And I'm not trying to be overly philosophical. I'm using his language. But what that means is we have the clothes
And the intent.
and then how I'm going to wear the clothes.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So the objective principle that and this is him, this is not me. So if you don't like it, it's him. Although I agree with it, so it's me. The objective principle is that we should dress in a way that honors the dignity of the human person, male and female. I think that is always true. It spans the globe. But he points out that you have to remember that that's always going to apply differently to different customs and cultures, settings, and time periods.
Yeah. Especially
Thoughts?
time periods. Well,
Yeah.
no, I mean, you see, what was acceptable in society at one time has changed over time.
Right. And then the lens through which people view that fashion also changes over time.
Yeah.
He has a really nice podcast. I think he has it with his wife. But he was talking about how, and again, this is his story. I'm not trying to steal his content. But he talked about how there are primitive communities in the world who they don't wear clothing necessarily, especially the women. They might wear a bottom, but they don't wear a top.
Sure.
And so historically, Christian missionaries have gone to these communities and they have insisted that the women wear shirts. And what they found was that the more with the customs and the expectations and the way that they viewed male and female in that community, when they told them to put the clothing on, they started to use the clothing in a way that they made themselves more like alluring. They were using the clothing in a way that it wasn't intended for. And so they were like, you have to, that's a mixing of cultures. You can't take a European clergyman maybe and send him to a primitive community elsewhere in the world and expect that standard of modesty.
Yeah.
That's not appropriate for that community.
Right.
And so that's what I'm saying when I'm saying if you just put a bunch of clothes on a table, I would say, well, who's wearing this? When are they wearing it? Why are they wearing it? All that stuff I think has to be worked out. JB2 says that the guiding principle of all this is that immodesty happens because people have this question. They want to know, okay, well, what if things are difficult to understand, if this is a complex situation, what firm ground can I stand on so that I can begin to figure out some of these things when it comes to modesty, specifically modesty in dress. And he says immodesty happens when someone behaves in such a way that it has the explicit intention to arouse lust in others. So I think that is the important guiding principle, at least for this introductory episode on something like the moral issue of modesty.
Yeah, because I think that gets at the intent, like that what we're talking about, like what's going on interiorly.
Yes.
Like why we have to ask ourselves why we're doing this.
Right. What you end up wearing does matter, but what matters first is what has motivated you. What's your intention with all of it? What do you hope to to do in the world with that outfit or that article of clothing. You know, what's going on in the heart and the mind that now it's coming out.
Yeah.
So the test of modesty, I think, should be, why are you doing it? Attractiveness is one thing, right? Male and female. Men want to be just as attractive, by the way. But lust and sin, and especially intentionally leading somebody else to sin, is another. Or unintentionally leading somebody to sin is also another.
Sure.
So these are things that we can talk about in the future. If you're struggling with modesty, a conversation about modesty, does your dress respect the dignity of others? Does it respect your dignity? Does it encourage other people to see you as a person rather than an object? Does it build up the kingdom of God? Is this clothing fit for the presence of God? I think these are important conversations to have. And I think the more you cultivate a relationship with God, these things will naturally follow. These complex situations will just become, they're not as gray as they used to be. You say, oh, I'm a person of faith. I'm a woman of God. I'm going to wear this today. I'm going to wear this today. And I want to be attractive in doing so. There's no issue with any of that. But again, the why is important. The intention is important.
Yeah.
Let's work that out first.
In closing, I think modesty, it's far more than a dress code, all right? Because we're talking about something that's going on interiorly in the heart. And it's really a virtue of the human heart. And ultimately, I think it helps us to become saints. I mean, that's the goal. I mean, that's what the virtues are there for. The virtues are there to help us to grow in holiness. So we can learn from the humility of Christ. We can learn from the modesty of Mary, and we can learn from the witness of the saints. They're really our example. But it's going to take a lot of courage, I think, for us to be modest in this world, because we live in a culture where modesty has no value, because we've objectified so much of what we do, including ourselves, that modesty just kind of goes out the window. And so humility, as we talked about, really is the doorway to modesty. And so we have to remind ourselves, blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. So when we allow modesty to really take root in our hearts, we begin to recognize, we begin to see God in others. We begin to see God in the world around us. And trust me when I say that will begin to have an effect on how we live out our relationship, how we view others, how we speak to others. That's really what changes the interior disposition of our hearts. So, in closing, think about some of the areas in your life where you can lead by example, or where there is a greater need for the practice of modesty. Are there areas in your life where this is manifesting? And ask
and
God.
If it is, you have good company, because Dennis also struggles.
Yeah.
So
This is true. We all struggle. Yeah, take that to prayer. Ask God to give you the grace that you need in order to work through it, and the healing that you need of any vice that might be standing in your way. And He'll do it. Yeah, He'll do it. And if you begin to work, I think too, begin to work on humility, all of the others begin to kind of
I
fall
totally
into
agree.
place.
Humility is the key for.
They really do. All the other ones really begin to fall into place.
Well, because if you're not being humble, then you don't even see the need for virtues to grow, right? For God to plant things and to prosper them.
Yeah, humility would be, I don't have an issue with modesty. It was pride. If I struggled with humility, that would be the response. I don't have an issue with modesty.
And God looks at you and says, I love you, but you have a lot of issues. And I want to let me heal them, let me fix them, let me increase something else in you.
Yeah.
And then we're actually the people that God created us to be.
There you go.
All right, we'll see you next week.
All right, God bless.